Good evening. Thank you for attending today's Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. We'll get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. In the event of a fire or other emergency, please follow the exit signs that are provided in this room and throughout Town Hall. Upon exiting the room, the main exits are located in the front and rear of the building. Do not use the elevator during an emergency event. This meeting is being recorded and streamed online at amherstny.iqm2.com. If you are here to speak on a item, you do not have to stay for the entire meeting. You can find out the results of any petition by calling the town clerk's office tomorrow after 9 a.m. The next meeting after today will be held on Tuesday, March 19th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. We'll now do a calling of the roll. Present.
Present.
All right, thank you. Approval of the minutes. We only have 2 members present who were at the previous meeting. Yeah.
Even if you weren't at the meeting. Robert's rules.
Okay. So I'll take a motion for approval of the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes?
Yeah. Okay. Is there a second? I'll make a motion for a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passed 3-0. If you are here for item number 4, that item is being withdrawn. We'll get started on the first item on today's agenda. That is 1370 Dodge Road. If you are here to speak on that item, please come to the podium. Please write your name and address on the sheet provided, and say that when beginning your presentation. Thank you.
I did fill this out already.
All right.
Christina and Paul Stadelmeyer at 1370 Dodge Road. We are here to appeal for a temporary use permit to allow his work truck to stay in the driveway. As you can see in the pictures, we have the camper on the one side to block any signage. We have the recycling and garbage can on that side to block it. It was pulled up a little bit because of there was snow previously, but we can back the truck up a little further. That's pretty much it.
All right, I just have a quick question. On the petition, it looked like it was that the approval last expired on June 19th, 2021?
Yes, we didn't know it was an ongoing thing. And
Okay. Does any member have a question for the petitioner?
And your neighbors have gotten their input on this issue?
Yeah, as far as I know, my immediate neighbors have no issue with it. Back in 2021, I went around to all the neighbors, gave them our information. If they had a problem, I said, please let me know, we can make adjustments.
So basically continuing what you're already doing because the prior permit or approval expired.
Right.
And how long have you been parking your vehicle there?
6 years?
6 years, and no complaints in 6 years?
No.
This is the reason it's before you is because there have been complaints to the building inspection's office. And they advised, I believe, the petitioner that their permit had expired years ago, but I don't know the status of the complaints, if they're anonymous or not. That's why it's before you.
All right, thank you. Is any member of the audience here to speak on this item? All right, the hearing is closed. I'll open it up for comments or any motions that any member may have.
Motion to approve?
I have a motion to approve. And a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that is passed 3-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The second item on today's agenda is an area variance for 31 Brennan Road. Will the petitioner please come to the podium? Please write your name and address on the sheet provided and state it clearly in the microphone.
You talking?
Hi. Susan Roberts, Charlie Roberts, 31 Brennan Road. We're here for a variance for setback variance for an addition on our home, as it's spelled out in the application. It's not in compliance because we're in the SA zoning. But our house is already not in compliance because it's already built that way. So we're just adding on to it in the back. Between 400 and 450 square feet. So we're staying within the perimeters of the house itself. Actually, we're jetting it in a little bit.
So when I reviewed this, the question that I had is the distance between the main house and the side compared to what is being added for the addition. Will the addition be the same distance or further away than what is currently for the main portion of the house?
I'm not quite sure what you're
Yeah, I'm
at.
confused as to what you're asking. It's directly off the back of the house, in line with what's there now.
It's actually jostling. It's,
Yeah,
yes,
it's coming in a little
it's
bit.
coming in a little bit. Yeah, it's not right in line with the house. It's actually coming in further into the property line. Correct. That's the, yes, I should have prefaced it that way.
Any other questions or comments we have?
And it's for the construction of a new bedroom and bathroom?
Yes. Yeah, we're just bumping out the 2 bedrooms so that we can put another bathroom in the house. The house has only ever had 1 bathroom.
Has there been any issues with neighbors aware of this
No.
happening?
No,
No.
no.
Nope.
We know all our neighbors. No one has a problem with it. We have plenty of yard in the back. We back all the way up to Tonawanda Creek, as you can see.
Is any member of the audience here to speak on this item?
Here at the Kingsgate Park is to install new field lighting for the south field here. Right now, we are seeking a variance as our lighting illumination levels on the east and west side exceed the amount per the town code. Right now, we've been working with Musco Field Lighting. They've done previous projects for the town for other baseball fields such as Mathewson McCarthy Park as well as Lou Gehrig's Field. And we'll mainly, as you can see here, we have our 6 new lights that are going to be installed. Same type of looking light as what has been used throughout the other baseball fields. Steel poles with precast column bases. And I know our Musco designers have tried to optimize the best lighting solution to efficiently light this field without doing their best to not disturb the neighbors, which to the east is mainly just the National Grid power line towers, and then to the west is the on-ramp in the New York State Thruway Authority. We have contacted both the National Grid and New York State Thruway Authority. National Grid has no opposition to our project, and New York State Thruway Authority just wants to request us to do a nighttime test to look at glaring issues from the lights. But Musco did also point out to us that the lighting that they do use more points the lights down towards the fields versus projecting out. So glare really should not be an issue, but if any adjustments need to be made, they could once the lights are up in the air.
in terms of Lights Village on the south side, on the other side of Worley, there wouldn't be any to that side?
Nope, those are within our levels that we need or meet per the town code.
Is there any member of the audience here to speak on this item? Okay, the public hearing is closed. Any comments or motions any member would like to make?
Before you make a motion, we need a secret determination.
Can I get a motion on a negative deck? Motion, Ellen, second by Eric. All in favor? Aye. The negative deck has been passed. Anyone want to make a motion for approval of the motion by Ellen?
Second?
Second by Eric. All in favor? Aye. Passed.
Thank you.
Thank you. As I said in the beginning of the meeting, the fourth item on the agenda has been withdrawn. Can I get a motion to accept the withdrawal?
Motion to accept the withdrawal.
Motion by Eric, second by Ellen. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. On the fifth item of today's agenda, 4174 Bailey Avenue. It's an area variance. Please write your name and address on the sheet of paper if you have not already done so, and state the same in the microphone for the record.
Mark Daniels from Bocce Club Pizza, 4174 Bailey. Just, we're looking to add a digital signage to our center sign in front of our parking lot, just to take advantage of the traffic in the area. It's a lower sign. We'd have it running during business hours from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Similar businesses down the street have something like that. Bogart's down the road. They have houses across the street as well. And also Franco's on the corner of Eggert and Bailey has a sign. So we're just looking to take advantage of that and add that to the property.
So would it be 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day?
Yeah, we'd have it set on a timer, yeah, just to take advantage of the traffic and just put up specials and like if we're hiring and things like that, just to use that space. Right now we have to like advertise on like the telephone poles and stuff like that, so we'd rather clean it up a little bit and just use what we have right there on the property.
Are you open on any time later during the week?
We close at Sunday through Thursday. We're closed at 9, and then Friday, Saturday we close at 11. So those are our times.
So if we were to put a restriction on this variance to have it during business hours, would you be asking for 11 p.m. on Friday and Saturday evenings, or would?
Well, we could, I mean, after later in the night, I'm sure we could just shut it down at 10. I mean, that time of night, we have no reason to have it open. I mean, up that long. So we could just set a 10 o'clock cutoff for it.
Either of you have any questions? Is any member in the audience here to speak on this item? All right, the public hearing is closed. This was a contentious item at the last meeting that we had, and I just want to remind each member that it would have to be unanimous in order for it to be approved today. So
What was the issue last time? I wasn't here present at the last meeting.
We had residents, I believe, two come
I saw somebody on Maynard, like a street over from us, that was,
who had concern about the illumination that would result during the nighttime from the sign.
okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I couldn't speak to the exact illumination. I haven't seen it, but have you been to the Bocce property? I mean, as far as like, we're pretty wide as far as our main side, I mean, our property, and then I don't think it would illuminate very much as far as the residential.
You know,
Yeah,
I just put the, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, illumination into the,
Yeah, you see, like, it was kind of lower too. I don't even see it. It's like below our normal business sign. Like we have our center parking lot sign, and then it'd be below that. So, I mean, just mostly for cars driving by. It would be below the sign on the arch there, just facing north and south.
But it is abutting residential districts.
Yeah, like down the street, like the Bogarts down the road, they have a sign, and it's gotta be the zone the same as we are, I would assume. They have houses across the street, just like we do. There's businesses there, and then we actually own that property there on the left. We own that property, correct? And we have employees who work across the street from us and other people, so I personally don't think it would be an issue, but farther down the road, though, there are.
You're gonna keep the existing sign and just.
Yeah, the digital signage would be below that sign. It's like where the arch is, it would be below that. Like right in that area. I don't know if they showed you, I don't know if you, it's just, that's like kind of what it would be.
Yep.
No, you saw it, yeah.
Can you show where 300 Maynard is in relation to the, yes. Okay.
I don't think you can see through. My parents live in a house across the street there with the pool, so I know that area well. You can barely see through that tree line over there. It's pretty dense. You're going through 2 backyards and everything, so I can't see that. And the light wouldn't be shining that direction because it's going north-south down Bailey. So it's.
Would anyone like to make a motion on this, or? I'm fine. I'd like to see a condition on it that it would be by 10 p.m. That's about it.
And the 10 PM condition, that's something,
Oh, yeah, we can have the sign company and our electricians, we have timers running all our lights. Everything goes on and off automatically. So it'll be something we'd set up. We wouldn't, yeah, we don't want to make our neighborhood angry, obviously. It's like our bread and butter, so that's, want to make them happy.
could I see the picture that you?
Oh, that I brought?
Yeah.
Do we want to put it on the?
That's just what I'm saying. Oh, okay, so that's what, the same thing that we saw, okay. Got it.
It's for the viewing audience. All right. So is there a motion on this item?
Like to make a motion to approve
Would you like any conditions on that?
that it would be shut down on a timer, 10 PM.
Sure.
Every day.
Okay, that was absolutely doable.
Is there a second on that? Or I'll make the motion for a second on that. All in favor? Aye. No opposed. Pass 3-0.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. We are on the sixth item of the agenda. That is an area variance for 2350 Sweet Home Road.
Good evening, Chairman Brad, members of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Sean Hopkins on behalf of the applicant, Essex Homes of Western New York. Also with me is Kevin Curry. Go to the next slide, Tom. So some of you recall, because you were on the board, this particular property located at 2350 Sweet Home Road. It's zoned both MFR 5 and OB. The portion that's being developed and has been developed is zoned MFR 5. This process for the site began about 11 years ago when the original owner, North Forest Development, cleared this land pursuant to what was then going to be an office complex. My client purchased this property several years ago. It is also important to note that the site incorporates the former Average Joe's Bar, which was located on the corner of Sweet Home and Ellicott Creek. Next slide. There's a zoning map, and you can see our site, MFR 5 and OB, and there's a wide assortment of zoning classifications in the immediate vicinity of this site, including homes directly to the south, to the west, which are generally speaking on parcels that are zoned SA. Next slide. Those are pictures of the existing buildings on site. On the right, that's a 3-unit building, and then on the left, that's just an interior of one of the kitchens. Next slide. So this is the site plan that we had most recently presented to this board and also to the town. And basically what it shows is a total of 48 units, 14 buildings, 5.25 acres of green space, including this large area here and this green space area here, which in total equates to 43.8% of the site. We are going to install a fence along the entire western edge, the southern edge, I'm losing it, and then also along that portion that comes down to the creek. Next slide. And here's what we're proposing this evening. So the changes that we're making are fairly simple. As you recall, on the western portion of the site, what we were previously depicting was two larger 4-unit buildings, and we're simply replacing those with 4 2-unit buildings. You may ask the reason why. The reason why is, to a large degree, we have found there's more demand for what I would call the exterior end units because they have windows on the sides as well. No increase in the density whatsoever, and in fact, we think this makes it more consistent with the scale of the surrounding neighborhood, especially the properties located directly to the west and to the south. Because of that change, we do require a couple of setbacks. Number one, building separations. We need a variance for that. Per the code, it's 46.79 feet, or no, per the code, it's 1.5 times height. And then we also need a setback variance for what is denoted as buildings 9 and 10, which are highlighted in yellow, or building separation. We've simply pushed those a little bit closer. So those are at 17.29 feet if you measure from the rear of a potential sunroom, but the actual main wall of the buildings does comply with the code. It is at 41.29 feet. And those variances have previously been granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals in connection with this project. Next slide. These are elevations showing on the top. That is what the previously approved 4-unit building would look like from the front. And then on the bottom, that's what we're proposing, 2-unit buildings. Again, with no change whatsoever in the overall density of the project. I think we can all agree that's a nicer look in terms of community scale, compatibility with nearby residential uses. Next slide. Oops, I think we skipped one. And that's, yep, there you go. And that's the rear elevation. You can see, again, bringing down the scale of those buildings, making them more compatible with the neighborhood. So on all 4 sides, the aesthetics of the building in terms of scale and compatibility has been improved. Next slide. Here's where I'm going to highlight the variances. So area variance number 1, the separation between those four 2-unit buildings, which were previously 2 4-unit buildings, per strict application of the zoning code, section 315.5, 27 feet would be required, and they're at 17.29 feet. These are the same exact variances that have previously been granted between buildings number 4 and 5 and buildings number 5 and 6. So absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. That required separation is based on 1.5 times the peak height of the building because the longest walls are parallel. Next slide. Area variance number 2 is that building separation. Again, variance that's already been granted between buildings 9 and 10. In this instance, the requirement is 29.88 feet, and we're showing 17.9 feet. Again, that was granted between buildings 11 and 12, which are the next buildings to the east, so we don't think that's problematic. And if you look at the main walls, rather than the potential first floor sunrooms, we would comply. We're at 41.29 feet. Next slide. So obviously, in connection with this request, as is the case with any request for area variances, it's governed by the balancing test and the 5 criteria set forth in New York State Town Law, Section 267B3B, which requires you, on the one hand, to balance the benefits to be received by the applicant if the requested relief is granted, and weigh those against any resulting detriments to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community. Here the benefits are clear. I've already talked about it. We're having increased demand for those end units. We're making it more compatible with the scale of the neighborhood. There's absolutely no change in the density of the site. On the other hand, there are no detriments. There's simply a minor change that we think is an improvement. Criteria number 1 is whether the granting the requested relief will result in undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties. We think the answer is no, and again, that in fact, the impacts are positive, including reduced scale and size of the buildings and additional variation on the rear elevations. Criteria number 2, whether the benefits that we'll receive if you grant the requested relief can be received by some other method other than the requested area variances. And the answer there is no. The building separation variances that we're seeking are the minimum relief necessary to accomplish the benefits that we would obtain. Next slide. Criteria number 3 is whether the requested area variances are substantial. And the key inquiry in connection with that particular criteria is whether any harm will result. And we do not believe any harm will result. And again, it's identical with area variances that have previously been granted by this board. Criteria number 4 is whether proposed variances will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood. The answer to that is no. It is important to note this particular request is a type 2 action pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, which means it's exempt from seeker. But both the planning board and the town board have previously conducted exhaustive environmental reviews of this project and issued negative declarations. And then finally, criteria number 5, whether the alleged difficulty was self-created. And as the board is aware, that cannot be the sole basis for your decision making. I guess we could view it as being self-created, but in reality, it's a change in market conditions and really trying to address concerns about compatibility in terms of scale, architecture, et cetera. So with all that being noted, we would ask that you consider granting the requested relief. On the other hand, noting that there are only 3 members here, if you think it's more appropriate to leave the hearing open until next month, that would be an acceptable outcome as well. We'd like to move this forward, but it's not an emergency situation. So with that being said, if there's any questions, I would welcome the opportunity to address them.
Is the square footage and the amount of space being changed?
No, exactly the same. So it's literally taking those 4 units and dividing.
Take Legos and.
Yes. No increase in the size.
Is there any other questions for Mr. Hopkins?
So is the sole reason for this is that based on your client's experience?
Yes.
The demand is higher?
Yeah, because think about it, the interior units, just even though they're cheaper, they don't have as many windows, where if you have an end unit, you get the windows on an exterior wall as well. And also, again, we just think the 2-unit buildings really do look nicer. Those 4-unit buildings, they're not that big, but they're, not as compatible with the single-family homes in the area. But literally, that is the only reason we're making that change. I would also note, Tom, can you go back to the slide of the current plan? I would also note those 4 buildings, we have moved them 5 or 10 feet further from the western property line as well. Meaning pushing everything closer into the middle.
But the distances between buildings will be similar to the other portion of this site.
It is, yeah. And you can see it best on the south. These are 4-unit buildings, but you can see, in fact, those are actually the same or a little bit closer than the relief we're requesting here. And the trade-off for all of that, of course, is, we left a large amount of this site as permanent green space, and that's already subject to a deed restriction, so there's no more development of all that additional acreage on site.
Is any member of the audience here to speak on this item? Please come forward. Put your name and address on the sheet of paper on there, as well as state it in the microphone for the record.
Hi, my name is Chris Stone. I live at 550 North Ellicott Creek Road, which is the western property bordering the project right here. We know why they're doing it. I think it's actually a good recovery. My question, I only came for questions. I'm not here to dispute anything. The height of the new buildings, is the height of the new buildings the same as it was? Okay, so there's no height change. What about the offset from my property line to the back of those buildings. Sorry. Did anything change in here?
So you're asking here?
Correct.
We've moved it, Kevin, how much further away? 5 or 6 feet. Yeah, further away, yeah.
Okay. And then.
From this line.
Yeah, right. Oh, good, my advantage. And then, what was the reason for the two buildings in the middle being closer together?
Because by pushing this 5 feet further, 5 to 6 feet further, it pushed these closer.
Why did you move it 5 feet away from the zone, from the property line? What was the reason to go out that way?
Here?
Yeah, well, I mean, why did you move the buildings out?
Oh,
5
because
feet?
remember, originally, we moved the buildings closer.
Closer, why did you do that?
So that we
What was
could
the advan-
accommodate, either rear patios or single-story sunrooms without encroaching on the zoning line, which is here.
Okay.
As you recall, we asked for that to be rezoned, and it was not well received.
Of course not. So I appreciate what you've done here. I mean, you took 2 buildings and turned them into 4, because center buildings, the centers of the buildings were, there's no windows allowed in the back, we understand all that. I can only tell you, you guys found a solution for the problem, and
Thank you.
I appreciate that. We're good with this. I came because I was curious as to why anybody would want to put their buildings closer together on the property, along with the fact that on the request, it says they want to move buildings 15 and 16 closer together, and there wasn't a 15 and 16 that I was aware of.
I think Mr. Ulatowski pointed out that I had a typo on the first page.
So we know.
I sent him an email clarifying.
Right, so now we know what's going on, and yeah, we're okay with that. I just had a couple of questions.
Oh, I do want to note, there is a building 15 and 16.
There is, but there wasn't on the original plan.
Oh, there
so-
wasn't, right.
Right, so I thought, well, wait a minute, they're moving 2 buildings that aren't even here.
There wasn't.
Okay, we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak on this item? Okay, I think we'll close the public hearing. Do we have any comments or anyone would like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve?
We had a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. No opposed.
Thank you.
Passed. 3-0. Now to the 7th item on today's agenda, an area variance for 4300 Millersport Highway. Mr.
Good
Hopkins?
evening once again. Sean Hopkins on behalf of the applicant, Samato and Sons. This project will also look familiar because you saw it in June of 2022. The property that we're presenting this evening pertains to 4300 Millersport Highway. Next slide. So this is the plan that we presented to you on June 21st of 2022, and I want to highlight some certain things because it's important for comparison purposes. This entire site is zoned traditional neighborhood development, which from my perspective is a strange zoning out that far in the northern portion of the town. But that was done about 20 years ago, literally, to eliminate the possibility that was then proposed was literally a Walmart supercenter. That Walmart supercenter ultimately ended up on Sheridan Drive. We received a jurisdictional determination from the Army Corps of Engineers for this site on January 17th of 2019. At that point, pursuant to this plan, what we were proposing was 0.76 acres of wetland impacts. We were also showing 38 patio homes, you can see here, and a total of 40 townhomes, which was 7 4-unit buildings and 6 2-unit buildings, which was all proposed in phase 1. Additionally, at the request of the supervisor, we set aside this additional about 8 acres for future development, meaning the town at that point in time was interested in considering some type of commercial agricultural use on that land. So we set it aside and said, hey, we'll work with you in the future. Ultimately, you granted some setback variances on June 21st of 2022. The planning board approved the site plan on February 21st of 2023, and we ran into a new issue. If you can go to the next slide, Tom. Oops, those are the area variances that were granted on June 21st of 2022. The only reason I'm highlighting these is what you'll see is literally we're asking for the exact same relief for a somewhat modified project layout. Basically, the TND zoning requires that you can have a maximum, and this is maximum, building setback of 6 feet, which I think we can all agree, having a house 6 feet from a road, if a snowplow goes by, sidewalks, driveways, it's difficult to do. And then we had 2 utility structures, a sewer pump station, and I believe an RPZ that needed a setback variance as well. Next slide. So we were required to hire Earth Dimensions to do an updated wetland delineation. Normally speaking, jurisdictional determinations like the one issued in 2019 are valid for 5 years, but there was a stakeholder in the vicinity that submitted some additional information to the Army Corps of Engineers, and lo and behold, they required us to do a new delineation. That took some time, and on January 18th of last month, the Army Corps of Engineers issued a new jurisdictional determination. And not surprisingly, given my history in this area, what happened is the size of the wetland on site increased by about 3 acres. Most of it was located over here, which is exactly where we're proposing the previous project that got approved. So we went back to the drawing board and decided, we need to figure out a way to minimize wetland impacts because that project, although already approved by this board and the planning board, was most likely no longer feasible from the perspective of the Army Corps of Engineers as a result of the required increase in wetland impacts. Next slide. So this is the updated plan that we're presenting to you this evening. Again, based on the wetlands now being 34.84 acres rather than approximately 31.5 acres. We're proposing the exact same number of units, 38 patio homes, 7 4-unit townhomes, 6 2-unit townhomes, and those will be 2-story, and a public roadway instead of a private roadway. The number of units is exactly the same, 78. So previously we had 78 units here. Now we have 78 units here. I had met with the supervisor and told him about this situation, and he said in light of the fact that the town is spending a lot of effort on many projects, including the Boulevard Mall, that this was not high on the priority list. So we removed that being a set aside and literally took the density that we already had approved and spread it across this whole area. It's also important to note that there's this next phase in the future, which is mixed-use buildings. Those have not been designed. Same status as June of 2022. Those will require a separate approval at some point in the future. We have submitted an updated wetland permit application to the Army Corps of Engineers based on this plan. And while we're now actually increasing the development area, while not increasing the density of the project, our wetland impacts have gone down. We were told that we should make an effort to reduce that to less than 1/2 of an acre, and literally on this very large site, we're now at a wetland impact limited to 0.39 acres. And you can see where some of that is, these little edges that are just literally unavoidable. To a large degree, other than that, that giant new larger wetland area will be preserved as permanent open space. Will remain undeveloped forever. It's literally 85% of this site. Next slide. So the variances. The variances are very similar to what was granted in June of 2022. We need setbacks for the townhomes and the patio homes from the right-of-way. Again, 6 feet is the maximum that you can have, and we're proposing 20 feet. 20 feet will accommodate a front yard, not creating a hazard if a snowplow goes by. We think that's an acceptable setback. It'll still have that feel of kind of a tighter community, which will be cool, but not a 6-foot setback. We need side yard setbacks for 2 of the patio homes, similar to what was previously granted. And again, the maximum allowed is 6 feet. So per strict compliance of the code, these would literally, the side of these 2 patio homes would have to be only 6 feet from Smith Road, which in my opinion doesn't make a lot of sense. What we're showing for building 1, which is this patio home, is 16 feet, and on the other side, 91.5 feet. And then finally, what I think is very, very minor, the sanitary sewer pump station is viewed as being a structure by the town, and that has a setback of 10 feet versus the maximum of 6 feet. Again, we want to keep that screened with landscaping and not push it too close to the public roadway. Next slide. So obviously this is governed by the balancing test and the 5 criteria. And again, I want to emphasize we've reduced our wetland impacts while taking land that was previously going to be developed by the town and incorporating into the site with absolutely no change in the density or the scope of the project. Will this result in an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood? No. We've decreased the wetland impacts, no increase in the density, and elimination of that future development area, which would have generated some type of impacts in terms of traffic, density, et cetera. Whether or not the benefits that we'll receive if you grant the requested relief can be received by some other method, no. Again, we're making an effort, an environmental effort, to minimize the wetland impacts to the maximum extent practical. That's exactly what we've done based on the new jurisdictional determination. Criteria number 3 is whether or not the request is substantial. And again, the key is whether there's any harm. These are literally identical to variances granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals on June of 2022. Criteria number 4, whether the granting of the requested relief will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood. No, it is important to note that because we have changed the layout, this will require a site plan amendment from the planning board, meaning we'll have to submit fully engineered plans and go through that lengthy review process once again. And again, we've reduced the wetland impacts from what was previously proposed all the way down to 0.39 acres. And then the final criteria, whether the alleged difficulty was self-created. And as you know, I generally give away that criteria because number 1, it cannot be the sole basis for your decision-making, and number 2, the other 4 criteria in this instance weigh in our favor. Here, however, I think a very strong argument can be made that it's not a self-created hardship. We had a jurisdictional determination issued in June of 2019. Generally speaking, those are valid for 5 years. It was prepared by an expert, issued by a wetland permitting agency. Unfortunately, we had to go back to the drawing board based on new information submitted, and we've adjusted our layout accordingly and resulted in a reduction of the wetland impact. So I think in this instance, this alleged difficulty is not self-created. So with all that being said, what we would ask you to do is grant the 3 requested area variances as submitted, and of course, I would be happy to answer any questions that any of you may have. Thank you.
Member Gergen, Member Parkin, do either of you have a question for Mr. Hopkins? Is any member of the audience here to speak on this item? Come on forward. Please write your name and address on the sheet provided, as well as state that into the microphone clearly.
Hi, I'm Ashley Rich. I live at 210 Smith Road. The property originally butted right up against our property line there, and we were concerned about the wetlands being impacted originally, as well as the impact of taking away where a lot of the water seems to pool. And I'm not sure if there is anywhere in there that takes that into consideration still. I'm not really too sure with the new drawings where the ponds would be. This is our first time seeing the new drawings since the previous one, so I'm not really sure how we feel as a community on that, as most of the community was not really for this development. It definitely is an improvement from where it was, but I'm not sure. Is this the new one?
Yeah,
This is a new one? Okay. So are these the ponds here right behind those houses for the water retention? Yep. Okay. I'm not really sure. Can we go down to where the variances are being requested? So you're asking for it to be closer into the property line, is that correct? Like,
I believe the variances are requesting to be further out from the road.
okay. Okay. Yeah, we don't have a shoulder there on that road at all. So I could see where that would probably be best. I honestly just don't know how to feel about these plans or the variances, but you know, he had more to say on it, so I'm gonna let him speak. This is my husband.
Please step up to the microphone. Please write your name and address on the sheet provided, as well as state that clearly into the microphone.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Jonathan Rich. I would ask that the zoning board keep this hearing open until next month, partially because this is our first time seeing the new delineation. It's our first time seeing the new plan. In addition, one of my concerns with this, I know that the criteria for getting approval can't be because it's like a self-inflicted issue. I think part of the reason for the setback off of Smith Road on Unit 38 is, we are trying to maximize the density of this area. I think you can see from the plan that apart from the wetland delineation, which, we were the ones who initially challenged the wetland delineation. Based on what I'm seeing here, we may have to challenge it again. But I think the setback on Unit 38 is created, or the issue for that is created because of that drainage pond that's adjacent to it. And, I'd be interested in seeing what the final plans look like. I know that's not the purview of this board, but being that, we do have a relationship with the builder or the developer, we do have a lot of interest in this. And last time this came before the planning board, we had close to 100 members in attendance at the planning board meeting. I would request that this remain open until next month so that we can discuss it with the builder, discuss it with Sean, and then maybe have some more thoughts next month. So if that's possible, I'd appreciate it. If not, that's okay as well.
Mr. Chairman, the matter has yet to come before the planning board. This would be a brand-new resubmission of a previously approved plan.
Oh, I understand, yeah.
The matter before this board is simply the dimensional relief. The current statute puts a maximum.
No, I understand. So for Unit 38, part of the reason that setback is increased is because of that retention pond being there. If that retention pond was placed elsewhere, there'd be fewer units on the property, but you wouldn't have the need for that setback. So the reason that setback is necessitated is because they're putting that retention pond exactly where they are. If they were to put it into a different location on the property, they might have fewer units, but they wouldn't require a variance for that part of the parcel.
Again, it's a maximum setback. So if they were to meet the statute, that building would have to be no further than 6 feet from the Smith Road right-of-way. They could reconfigure the pond to do that. Obviously, they don't want to have their building that close to Smith Road right-of-way.
Well, I think, again, I'll reiterate, and if Sean wants to advocate for himself, he can do that. But I think part of the reason why that unit's being set back is for the purpose of that retention pond. We've seen they've moved some of the ponds already. We worked with their engineer on the last time this project came before the planning board. But for that unit, I think that having that setback is simply a method to increase the density on this parcel.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak on this item? Please make sure your name and address is written on the sheet and state it into the microphone, please.
Hello, my name is Dan Trigaboff. I live at 222 Smith Road. I'm pretty much surrounded by this development. And while I don't have any specific comments on the setbacks that are being requested, I would like to just request that, as the previous speaker requested, there's another hearing on this because that's the first time I'm seeing the revised plan. And the second request I have is that the buildings near my property, 33, 32, and 31, if my eyesight is not failing me, sufficient privacy barriers be put in or some sort of barrier to preserve some element of my privacy on my property.
Now, Dan, the issue of screening would come before the planning board?
Yes, so when Mr. Hopkins and his client file a resubmission of an amendment to the previously approved site plan, those within 600 feet will be notified to participate to address any potential environmental concerns which they believe have not been addressed, anything pertaining to screening, traffic, the whole review starts all over. So there's plenty of opportunity to participate. This evening, they're simply seeking relief on dimensional standards to accommodate what we think will be the layout.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else here to speak on this item? Mr. Hopkins?
So as Mr. Ulatowski indicated, it is important to note, this will require a complete reapproval from the planning board. We come here first, obviously, because before we commit to spending another $100,000 on engineering, we want to see if the layout works. But I do want to note two things. Number one, and I think, is it Dan? I'm sorry. I think Dan lives here. So we're cognizant of him. Previously, we showed a townhome here, and we had it where if they put a rear patio or a deck, they would need an area variance from this board. We got rid of that. And that was actually based on some input from the planning department, so we appreciate that input. And I want to confirm, as Mr. Ulatowski indicated, it's a maximum setback, not a minimum setback, which is somewhat strange. So yeah, could we put this building here, closer to Smith Road? Yeah, you would just wind the detention facility between these two buildings. We'd prefer not to do that. It's really not a density grab. And in fact, if you look at this very, very large site and think about the fact we're only proposing 70 units, we're nowhere near the density that would be allowed. And if we really were going to make an effort to maximize density while still keeping our wetland impact as little as we proposed, we would just get rid of all the patio homes and fill these in with townhomes, and we could double the density of the site. That's not what we want to do. That's not what's going to happen, but I want to make sure it's clear. This relief is not being requested to maximize the density of the site. And in fact, if you compare what was already approved by this board and the planning board to what we're proposing now, which incorporates, again, that additional 8 acres, I mean, it's a reduction in density of the overall project in an effort based on a change in circumstances to minimize environmental impacts. Everything in terms of stormwater management, lighting, et cetera, that will all need to be considered by the planning board and numerous town departments and committees, and rest assured it will. So respectfully, we would ask that you grant the requested relief so that we can keep this process moving forward.
Thank you. So, members, what is before us is 3 variances regarding maximum setbacks. All of them are, the maximum setback is 6 feet, and they're seeking variances on all 3. On the Miller Sports setback, the request is for 20 feet. The maximum setback is 6. On the Smith Street, the maximum setback is 6 feet. The request is 91.5. And on the pump station, the maximum setback is 6 feet. The request is 10 feet. You know, that is the only thing before us at this time, and the other matters, as Mr. Ulatowski alluded to, will be before the planning boards and other town officials.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, the hearing's still open if you wish to keep it open or close it.
Yep, that was on purpose. So I don't know if the other members are comfortable voting on it tonight, or if we wanted to adjourn the public hearing and take it to the next meeting to have the full board discuss this item, because there are some concerns that the residents have brought forward. Those concerns largely were not related to the maximum setbacks that is being requested, but they were concerns brought forth nonetheless.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variances.
Could you just hold on for a second? I just want to get the temperature of Member Parker as well.
Seeing as this will be reviewed by the planning board from the start, I wouldn't have a problem with the proposed setbacks.
All right, we'll close the public hearing then, and then if anyone wants to make a motion, I'll entertain a motion.
For the same reasons articulated by Chairperson Parker, I have the same view that we should move forward and therefore make a motion to approve.
Member Gergen made a motion. Member Parker seconded. All in favor? Aye. No opposed. The item has passed 3-0.
Thank you.
The next item on today's agenda is number 8. That is from the Wrench Group for 3945 Wrench Road. It's a variance for a first floor height.
Good evening once again. Sean Hopkins on behalf of the applicant, Wrench Group LLC. This particular site's located at 3945 Wrench Road. Next slide. So just to acclimate everyone with the location of the project site, you can see Sweet Home Road, which is to the east, Wrench Road, which we front on, which is directly to the west. This is the 990, as it leaves the 290. And we're obviously on the opposite side of Sweet Home Road is the UB North Campus and various student housing projects. This particular site is zoned Center 5 District, which is one of the town's newer mixed-use districts created in 2019. The size of the site is approximately 0.57 acres. There's an existing two-family home on the site. And again, you can see the nearby uses: high-density student housing, mixed-use projects, hotels, et cetera, et cetera. This entire area has been redeveloped over the course of the past 2 decades. Next slide. You can see there's various zoning classifications in the immediate vicinity, literally 5 or 6 different zoning classifications. This is an infill site, and again, recently redeveloped or over the course of the past 2 decades, because until relatively recently, around 2000, there was no sanitary sewer infrastructure in this immediate area. Next slide. What are we proposing? We're proposing a 3-story multifamily building consisting of 12 units for lease, oriented towards Wrench Road, green space behind with an outdoor amenity area, and then parking spaces. This project will require site plan approval from the planning board and is on the planning board's agenda for its meeting on Thursday evening. Next slide. It's quite clear that this is consistent with the comprehensive plan. That was the basis of the town board rezoning this site last summer to CTR 5 based on figure 6A, which shows that this is appropriate for suburban center. Next slide. Figure 6 of the comprehensive plan supports that as well, the proposed use designating this site as appropriate for medium residential. Next slide. So because we're in one of the town's new mixed-use districts, an extra layer of review has been added, which was a 2-step review process, and that consists of a review by the Design Advisory Board. The Design Advisory Board, during its meeting on December 13th of last year, recommended approval of the project by the Planning Board, subject to 2 comments, one of which is very relevant this evening. Comment number 1 was the Design Advisory Board would support an application to the Zoning Board of Appeals to seek relief from Section 5A.44 so that the west side of the building will not require ground floor units a minimum of 2 feet above grade, the exact variance that we're requesting. They also asked that we relocate a sidewalk onto the site, which we've done. Next slide. It's the elevation of the building prepared by Sutton Architecture, and the variance we're asking for is pursuant, again, 203-5A44, which under strict application would require the ground elevation of these units to be 2 feet above grade, and we're proposing that those be at 0 feet at grade. Next slide. The color rendering that was approved by the Design Advisory Board will also be reviewed by the Planning Board. You can see we've incorporated vertical and horizontal relief, residential style roof, upgraded the materials. They asked for landscaping around the perimeter, et cetera, et cetera. And that was over the course of 2 months of review by the Design Advisory Board. Next slide. Of course, governed by the balancing test and the 5 criteria, benefits versus the detriments. Here there are benefits to the applicant. We'd like to keep this at grade. There's nothing in the vicinity that would mimic what I would call more a brownstone style unit where you have the above grade. Also in terms of ADA accessibility, all that stuff, this is a little bit easier. I'm not saying that that might not be an appropriate form of development in certain areas in the town, but here we don't think it is. The 5 criteria, whether or not the granting the requested relief result in undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties. I think the answer to that is no, especially after the exhaustive review process. That's taken about a year. Criteria number 2, whether the benefits we'll receive if you grant the requested relief can be received in some other method other than the requested area variance. The answer to that is no. Either we provide the 2-foot grade at entry level or we don't. Next slide. Whether the requested relief is substantial, and again, there is no harm. You actually have granted similar relief for a couple of other projects located in the mixed-use districts, including a Uniland multifamily project on North French Road. Criteria number 4, whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the environment. No. It is important to note the town board did issue a negative declaration and the planning board will be required to issue a secret determination as well. And then finally, whether the alleged difficulty was self-created. We did rezone this site to CTR 5, so we would acknowledge it's been a self-created hardship. However, at all times during this review process, we've been proposing that the first floor units be at grade. So respectfully, with all that being said, we would ask that you grant the requested relief. And of course, if you have any questions, I would welcome the opportunity to address them. Thank you.
Member Gergen, Member Parker, do either of you have a question for Mr. Hopkins?
No question.
Is any member of the audience here to speak on this item? Okay, the hearing is now closed. I'll take a motion or any comments that any member may have.
I move to approve.
Motion by Member Parker,
Second?
second by Member Gergen. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
No opposed. Passed 3-0.
Thank you.
We're now on to the 9th item of today's agenda. That is variances for 1459 Niagara Falls Boulevard.
Good evening once again. Sean Hopkins on behalf of the applicant, Mission Barbecue Amherst, New York, LLC. Also with me, came in from out of town, is Josh Mitchell of Mission Barbecue and Pat Sheedy, the project engineer from Carmina Wood Design. If we go to the next slide. So Mission Barbecue is a new use to Western New York. It's a family-style restaurant. And I'm going to let Josh give just a quick overview of what the actual restaurant is, what the corporate vision is, and why they've found this to be an appropriate site. So Josh, if you want to do that quickly.
Good evening, members. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you this evening and to briefly describe for you a little bit about our culture and our company. Mission Barbecue is the story of two best friends that had a love of barbecue, but more importantly, a love of country. We wanted to create a business that created meaning and significance, and so we opened our doors on September the 11th, 2011, intentionally on the 10-year anniversary of the day that our worlds were forever changed, with the hopes of, in some small way, being able to change it back. We wanted to create a place where people could gather, where they could belong, and where they could honor, remember, and thank as many of our American heroes as possible. How do we define a hero? As someone that would bravely raise their right hand to protect, serve, and save, be it locally in the form of a police officer, a firefighter, or a first responder, or by wearing the cloth of this great nation and serving in the military. From those humble beginnings in Glen Burnie, Maryland, we've been fortunate to grow from serving one community to serving 130, from serving in one state to serving in 19. It'll be our honor to be able to plant our third flag in New York, put on our uniform, and serve our community well in Amherst. Thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions about Mission Barbecue that you might have for me directly.
So this particular site is located at 1459 Niagara Falls Boulevard. And just to acclimate everyone, Raymore and Flanagan, which I think we probably all know, Meyer Road, Niagara Falls Boulevard, shopping plaza to the south with Tully's, et cetera, et cetera. This site is zoned CTR 5. The town rezoned the site to impose the mixed-use districts on this as well. The size of the site is an out parcel. It's 0.31 acres, and anyone who drives by this site, and I've been driving by this site literally for 30 years, it's literally just surplus paving. That's all it is. I've never seen a car parked there. Maybe a little bit here for some Tully's overflow, but generally speaking, it is literally pavement. There's no landscaping, there's no drainage to speak of, it's just a paved site. So Mission Barbecue is interested in locating on this site, and we think it's an excellent redevelopment of clearly an underutilized paved parcel that's surplus land for Raymore and Flanagan. Next slide. So what are we proposing? We're proposing a 4,641 square foot Mission Barbecue restaurant. Josh gave you a little overview of what the company's vision is. Based on input we received from the Planning Department and the Traffic Safety Committee, we're actually closing one of the existing curb cuts, which is located on the southern portion of the site, driving the traffic up to this existing curb cut, which I think the town views as beneficial. We're adding sidewalk along Niagara Falls Boulevard. We're adding some green space and landscaping, not only along the frontage, but also around the perimeter of the building. We're showing 75 parking spaces, which satisfies the zoning code. And this project does also require minor site plan approval from the Planning Department. We think we're very close there. However, the Planning Department could not grant minor site plan approval until the relief that we're asking for has been viewed by this board. Next slide. Again, this is a landscape plan. I would note that we don't own this site. We'll be leasing this site. So we have gotten some input back from Raymore and Flanagan, the landlord. They don't necessarily like the amount of trees that we're adding on this site in terms of them being large deciduous trees. We'll have some additional discussion, hopefully, with the planning department on that. But it is important to note we're greening this site, adding green space, adding pedestrian improvements, and really taking what's literally a vacant impervious surface and making it much better compared to the existing conditions. And of course, anyone who's been by a Raymore and Flanagan or any furniture store in West New York or elsewhere can see we're leaving way more parking than's needed for a furniture store. And that's even during busy holiday seasons, sales that occur on Labor Day, President's Day, et cetera, et cetera. We're very comfortable that we're not taking away parking that's needed for the existing business. Next slide. The elevation plan, I'll come back to this in a second because it does pertain to some of the relief we're requesting. I would note Mission Barbecue, again, given the large number of locations they have, as Josh indicated, has a prototypical building, not surprising. They have made some modifications here. They've increased the height of the building a little bit. I'll explain why in a second. And they've also added more storefront glass along the front facade than they would typically have at their other locations. Next slide. It's a floor plan. It's important to note this would be the front of the building. I'll show you why in a second. Next slide. This is a case with the previous application, clearly consistent with the comprehensive plan. This is designated per figure 6A as a suburban center. That's why the town initiated and rezoned this segment of Niagara Falls Boulevard. And again, if you look at the comprehensive plan, it talks again and again about the benefits of the infill redevelopment of underutilized parcels. And I think no one can take exception with this particular portion of that site constituting that. Next slide. Figure 6 also supports the request in terms of what we're proposing, designates this site as appropriate for commercial and mixed use. Next slide. And really why we're here. We're asking for 5 variances. I'm going to take them a little bit out of order and tie them to the plans. The first one is for the minimum height of the building. In this particular zoning district, 30 feet is required. However, this is a one-story restaurant. So we're proposing 22 feet. And again, slightly higher than their prototype. The project architect has worked deliberately and made a concerted effort to try and increase the height, increase the presence, but we really don't need a 30-foot tall, single-story restaurant building along that segment of Niagara Falls Boulevard. Then area variance number 3, front facade transparency, strict application of section 203, 5A 410F would require 60%, and we're showing 26%. These 3 areas. We are also showing glass on the sides as well. And again, this will be a very nice looking building, and we think it'll be a proud addition to that area. And we do have that transparency calculation literally on the plan. That's just enlarged from this area. Next slide. Why do we need that variance? Josh talked about some of the vision, and really one of the corporate objectives here is to honor law enforcement, military personnel. And that's part of the motif of the interior of these buildings. So this is showing the interior wall of a typical front facade, which generally speaking limits the windows to these very two small areas. We've increased that, but we do want to keep that same consistent look. This is the 3rd location in New York State. There will be other locations in New York State. So I think what we've done in terms of transparency along the front facade represents an adequate compromise. You'll clearly be able to see in the restaurant, but they can still honor the commitment they've made to law enforcement, veterans, et cetera, in terms of the interior design of the building. Next slide. Area variance number 2. So area variance number 2, in these mixed-use districts, the throat length, meaning how far back before you can have an access aisle for parking, per strict application of the code, 100 feet is required. We're showing 36.46 feet. Again, keep in mind, this site is literally already paved. We're closing a curb cut, adding an interior island. So we're going to improve traffic flow on this site. Currently, if you drive by this site and other underutilized parcels along Niagara Falls Boulevard, it's not uncommon to see someone just taking the shortest route possible, like literally driving perpendicular, ignoring the striping, ignoring the access aisles. this will prevent that from occurring. So we think that variance is acceptable, and again, this project has been reviewed by the Traffic Safety Committee. Area variance number 5 pertains to a catering truck, which I'll show you a picture of in a second, which is actually a catering truck that is utilized by Mission Barbecue, which would be located here. Again, part of the motif and marketing of the company. You'll find this in front of every single Mission Barbecue restaurant. However, because of where it is, it would actually require 2 large deciduous trees, which I think we can all acknowledge does not make a lot of sense, given that this is literally a functional building, a functional vehicle. It is used for catering day in, day out. So that does require a variance, and I've already talked about the additional green space that we are adding. Next slide. And the final variance, this is the catering truck that would sit in that area. Generally speaking, in most locations, it literally sits in the parking lot. Based on the input we received, we've created a more designated area, which we think is appropriate. However, because it does have lettering on it, it does require a variance because technically speaking, it could be viewed as a sign. However, unlike, for example, if you drive by commercial plazas, you'll see a subway van out by the street. You'll see a roofing company truck out by a street where they're not located. This is a fully functional vehicle which will be utilized for catering. It's part of their corporate strategy, part of their corporate marketing. So technically speaking, that does require a variance from this board. And again, we've created a designated area for it based on discussions with the planning department. Next slide. This is obviously governed by the balancing test and the 5 criteria. Again, benefits that will be received by the applicant if the requested relief is granted, weighed against any resulting detriments to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood. We think here it's quite clear. All benefits, no detriments. We're taking a vacant paved parcel that is never utilized and coming up with an appropriate infill commercial redevelopment. Whether or not the granting of the requested relief will result in undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties, we think the answer to that is no. And in fact, this will result in desirable changes in the character of that particular segment of Niagara Falls Boulevard. And of course, we're surrounded by much more intensive commercial development. Criteria number 2, whether the benefits that we'll receive if you choose to grant the requested relief can be received by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue. No, these variances are essential to implement the redevelopment of the site pursuant to the site plan that we presented. Next slide. Whether the requested area variances are substantial, no, there is absolutely no harm that will result. Criteria number 4, whether requested variances will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions. Pat Sheedy and his team at Carmina Wood Design have submitted fully engineered plans. Those fully engineered plans have been reviewed by numerous town departments and committees, and we're very close to finalizing the minor site plan approval process if we receive the variances we're seeking. And then finally, whether or not the alleged difficulty was self-created. And all I would note is historically, this site was zoned general business. The town rezoned the site as part of implementation of those mixed-use districts. We, of course, are aware of the zoning of the site, but it is important to note it's not a zoning district that was requested by the existing owner. So with all that being said, we would ask that you grant the requested relief. And of course, the members of the project team that are in attendance this evening would welcome the opportunity to address any questions that any of you may have. Thank you.
Is this a new building you're?
This is a new building, yes. So you want to go back, Tom, to the aerial right at the beginning? Yeah, so right now this is entirely pavement. That was just Pat trying to give you a representation of where this would be relative to everything in the vicinity, which I think is helpful. But right now it is literally parking. There is nothing other than pavement. There's not an inch of grass. There's not, and I've never seen a car there.
What's the projected timeline for the project, and when do you expect the opening to be, assuming the variances are?
I'm going to let Josh answer that.
Yeah, we would, so from our perspective, based on lead time of about 18 weeks of construction, we have a drop dead date of December 10th that we would like to open. After you get beyond that, then you get into the holidays, and we don't want our teammates on the road or away from their families. So if that were the case, it would push into the beginning of the next year, but ideally by December and the end of this year, if everything is approved.
And where are your other locations in New York?
We have one that will be opening soon in Albany. They're already on site to start the selection process there. It's under construction. And then in Henrietta is the other location that we have. That's been open for roughly 3 years.
Any other questions for the petitioner?
The catering truck is part of your signage? Is there going to be other signage on the building?
There is other signage. It'll be standard prototypical signage, yes. And I believe what we're proposing, it'll need to be verified by the building department. We'll comply with the code.
Because part of the time that truck will be off-site,
It will, yes.
presumably.
And I think what the planning department asked us to consider putting that designated area, I think it actually makes sense, rather than just sitting in the parking lot.
Particularly since it's a very noticeable truck.
It is, but again, it's part of, if you go to any Mission Barbecue, you'll see that truck. And it's fully functional.
Could you
Kept well
review,
maintained.
could you review the transparency variance one more
Yeah,
time?
so can we go back to the elevation, Tom? There we go. So per strict, and keep in mind, we're in the mixed-use districts. Per strict application, you're gonna need to zoom out a little bit so I can get the numbers. So per strict application of the zoning code, 60% of that front facade from here to here would have to be storefront glass, transparent. What we're showing is 26%, but we have gone beyond the prototypical front facade for a Mission Barbecue. And again, as part of an effort to comply as much as possible. But we do still want to provide that interior wall where they honor veterans, law enforcement, et cetera, et cetera. That's simply what they do at every single location, and it's integral to their success.
And you don't have any ability, a second floor, which
No.
would be providing additional,
No. Right, that's important to note as well. Remember, we actually increased the height of the building beyond the prototypical because to try and get closer to 30 feet, but 30 feet for a one-story building there, number one, we know the landlord won't accept it. Number two, it really doesn't accomplish anything.
So in other Mission Barbecues, there's actually more space for.
Right, there's less glass.
Less glass, more
Yes.
space to hang up
Yes,
mementos honoring.
there is.
Okay.
Right, and I want to note that's not only done on that interior wall beyond the front facade, it's literally the motif and decorating style of the entire restaurant.
So this represents something akin to a compromise
It does.
between complying
Right.
with the zoning law and staying true to Mission's culture.
Right, that's what we've been working hard over the course of the past few months to try and come up with that compromise.
And then the truck, based on that drawing, that's going to be generally parked in front of the area without glass.
You're correct, and that was done deliberately.
Is anyone in the audience here to speak on this item? Please write your name and address on the sheet and speak it into the microphone.
My name is already on the sheet. Brian Conover, 60 Meyer Road. If we could go back to the first slide, the overall picture. I own this property right here, which is 60 Meyer Road. This parking lot that he has referred to is what he said. It's basically empty all the time. The only problem is sometimes during the winter, they do put their snow about in this area, okay? And they also put snow in this corner. I'm worried about drainage onto my property, which I already get, both from a drainage pipe from that parking lot onto my property and snow. Another concern I have is there's an entrance here. I'm assuming that would stay and not be used in any way. The overall height of the property or the building, I think, is fine with, the minimum. I don't know why they have a 30-foot minimum. I don't know why you can't go less. And then also, drive-through. I'm assuming that there will be no drive-through at this location. That's all I have. Thank you.
So, Mr. Hopkins, could you come back to the microphone? So, could you address the concerns brought forward? And then also, I just want to make clear that if you weren't granted these variances, you'd still have the ability to build, there would still be the ability to build a structure at that site, just without the variances.
You mean additional development? Ask the question again, I'm sorry.
So he had brought a concern about snow.
Right.
And placement of snow. And so I'm just saying, I just want to verify that if we did nothing today, there could still be a building built at that location.
Oh, yeah, you could,
That would impact the snow.
yeah, you could build a much larger mixed-use building there. I mean, you have to have enough parking, et cetera, but you could. Yeah, so Mr. Conover's property is right here. Brian and I have known each other a long time, and it goes all the way back to here, so yeah, it's very deep. There is no drive-through. In terms of drainage, we're not changing the drainage conditions, so I don't think that should be a problem. There is a drainage system on site. Brian has indicated there's some concerns about its functioning, so we need to follow up on that. Snow removal, I'm not entirely sure where it's stored. I have no reason to doubt him, but we can certainly take a look at that. Keep in mind, my client will only be responsible for this out parcel. They are not the owner of the Raymore and Flanagan parcel. This is a land lease, meaning a ground lease for this particular use. So in terms of what we control, which is that lease parcel, with the exception of the variances, we believe it complies with the code. And again, Pat and his team have prepared and submitted fully engineered plans. And we do think from a traffic perspective, and again, Planning Department Traffic Safety Board, you know, we're actually eliminating a curb cut, which really has nothing to do with the actual relief that we're requesting, but will improve traffic conditions. And you can see this island will prevent what I always see in these larger plazas, which is basically people going every which way whatsoever, shortest direction to a curb cut. So I think it's a good thing.
Does anyone else on the board have any comments before we close the hearing? All right, I'll close the hearing then. Does any member have a comment or a motion they would like to make?
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
A motion by member Gergen. I'll make the second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
No opposed. The item is passed 3-0.
Thank you.
And we're on the last item of today's agenda. That is item 10. It is a special use permit from the 6812 Main Street LLC.
Good evening once again. Sean Hopkins on behalf of the applicant, 6812 Main Street LLC. Also with me are Paul and Michael Bliss, and once again, Pat Sheedy, the project engineer from Carmina Wood Design. This particular mixed-use project consists of 5 separate parcels that ultimately at least 4 of them will be consolidated. 2 of you remember we presented this project to you during your December meeting, and now we're back after going to the planning board. Next slide. So just to acclimate everyone with where we're at in terms of the location of the site. These are the 2 mixed-use buildings that have been very well received that Mr. Bliss originally developed at 6770 and 6790 Main Street. If anyone's been by Transit Main lately, this is a site that's currently being redeveloped. 6842 Main Street consists of a mixed-use building as well as townhomes. And then finally, the opportunity arose to purchase the middle parcel, which is the parcel located at 6812 through 6832 Main Street, as well as 2 residential parcels at 29 and 37 Tennyson. That was through 2 separate transactions. The total size of the site is 2.2 acres. The frontage is zoned general business, the Main Street parcels, and then the 2 parcels at 29 and 37 Tennyson are zoned MFR 5, multifamily residential District 5. Next slide. That's just to show you on an aerial photograph where we're at. I think everyone knows where the brew pub is, the existing mixed-use buildings, what I still call the Fridays Plaza, even though it hasn't been there for a decade. And then, of course, you can see Transit Road on the right. Next slide. It's a photograph, so I think we can all agree that this parcel is fairly outdated. I believe it's 6-7 decades old. It is important to note there are tenants in there that have leases. Paul is honoring the remainder of those leases until they burned off. And basically what we're going to do is redevelop this consistent with Paul's other very successful projects in the immediate vicinity as a mixed-use building. Next slide. That's the existing building or footprint of the building laid over the survey. Next slide. And that's what we're proposing. So we were previously here during December in connection with some variances. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over those again, but I do want to touch on what the project is. So we're showing a building that consists of both 4 stories and 5 stories, which will have 15,000 square feet of first floor commercial space and 34 upper story apartments. We're showing driveway connections onto Tennyson, which is what's previously been done. No driveway connections onto Main Street, which is important because obviously that's a very busy area at certain portions of the time. We are showing an internal roadway connection to Mr. Bliss's project that's under construction now at 6842 Main Street. 37 Tennyson, and I believe it was a condition recommended, may have been Mr. Bray or Mr. Schubert. During the December meeting, we indicated we're showing green space and stormwater management area on there. And the question was asked, well, are you willing to guarantee that? Will you ensure everyone, not only the board, but nearby residents, that will remain green space? So yes, we will. We agreed to a condition that that'll be subject to a deed restriction, and there will be no development in terms of buildings or parking on that site. Keep in mind, it's zoned MFR5. You could build a multifamily building on that site today. So that parcel will remain green space. And then we will provide high-impact screening, a 6-foot fence, and intensive landscaping on the southern side of the northern property of 37 Tennyson. This project will require site plan approval from the planning board upon the submission of fully engineered plans, an engineer's report, a SWIP, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide. Color rendering prepared by Sutton Architecture of the building, which again